So let's talk about muscle contraction. So if you haven't seen the first video and masters it, please do go back and look at it, make notes, because this is going to be the bulk of our exam number 3. If you know these next couple of steps that we're going to talk about, you are going to do really well on this next exam. If you don't and you're still a little foggy, you're going to have some major issues. My recommendation would be to have a piece of paper and go write down excitation, excitation coupling, contraction, and then relaxation. And then for each of the little things, write down steps that are occurring, maybe even take photos. If you were there before spring break, you probably already have these photos, but now you can add that details of what's happening at each of these steps. Again, if you know this is going to be one of your highest scoring exams. If you don't know this, you're going to have some major issues. So before we get going, let's talk about some of these parts. So first thing is we have the neuron itself, and then we have this little area, which is going to be our voltage-gated calcium channel. And that's going to help us with opening up when action potential starts. So we'll talk about that process soon. So here's our neuron. Here is our action potential. Over here, these little button things are going to be my calcium. This is my voltage-gated calcium channel. These are my vesicles. ACH are these green things. Again, another voltage-gated calcium channel. Over here, these are going to be my ligand-gated sodium channel. Here is going to be my T-tubules. This orangey area is going to be my sarcoplasmic reticulum. And look, there's calcium out here, and there's calcium down here. This is not the same calcium. This is different calcium, and they're just stored in two different spots. So just keep that in mind. And then we're going to have some muscle thick filaments and thin filaments. We'll talk a little more about them as the video gets deeper. Let's talk about excitation. So first thing that's going to happen with excitation is going to be that our action potential is going to come down. And as it comes down, it's going to hit these voltage-gated calcium channels. And as those voltage-gated calcium channels get activated, what's going to happen is our calcium is going to be open because voltage-gated is going to be open because of the volt. And it's going to come in and bind or dock with these vesicles. When they dock with these vesicles, what will happen is our ACH, which is our hormone, is going to, this vesicle will actually drop down and release the ACH, and the ACH will go into the synaptic cleft over the carpet in my office and dock to this ligand-gated sodium channel. So that's really part of excitation. So excitation really was when ACH is kind of out here, but I kind of gave you that little extra of what will happen when it comes out to that part. Okay, so now you can see that my action potential already hit, my calcium came in, my ACH is right here, and what will happen now is this thing is called ligand-gated sodium channel. So my ligand, a ligand is a fancy name for key, and what's my key is my ACH, and now that that key, ACH, has opened the gate, ligand gate, it's going to allow the sodium to come in. So now the sodium is going to rush in, and it's going to rush in to those T-tubules. So they're going to start to come in to those T-tubules this way. and this way. All of them are going to come in. So they'll come in through this gate. And you get the idea. They're all going to come in. And there's a ton of them. And you already know that sodium is positively charged. So sodium is positively charged. And calcium is also positively charged. And you probably already know that calcium and sodium, or anytime you put two positively charged ions together, they're going to repel. They don't like each other. So what's going to happen is one of them is going to leave. So here's my calcium. Remember, these buttons represent calcium. And this is my sodium. My sodium can only stay in these T tubules. They can't really diffuse out anywhere else. They're sort of stuck in this little zone. But the calcium can leave. And the calcium are actually going to go ahead and leave and dock to these little things. So there's going to be these things called troponin and tropomyosin. And let's talk about them really quickly before we sort of move on. So my thick filaments is going to be this red area, and my thin filament is going to be this orangey area. So my thick filament are going to have these heads on them, and my thin filament are going to have these couple things on them. So number one, you could see I have my tropomyosin. That's that string that sits in front of these little pockets. And the string is there to prevent this muscle from contracting. You'll also see that we have this thing called troponin. So troponin and tropomyosin work together because when troponin docks with calcium, it will move that string out of the way. And when it moves the string out of the way, can you see how it's got these little pockets in them? Those little pockets open up and allow these little feet to walk on them. And what that's going to do is condense my muscle. So it's going to make my muscle squeeze together. So let's look at that. So my sodium came into the T tubules because my ligand-gated sodium channels were open, so my sodiums came in. The reason they came in is because this area is filled with negative charges. And this area is going to have a ton of organelles in there. And organelles are going to be things like the mitochondria, the rough ER, the smooth ER, the nucleus. All that stuff has a negative charge to it. And you know that positively charged ions and negatively charged ions like each other. So the sodium rushed into the T tubules. But when things get too positive, this calcium doesn't like it. And the calcium doesn't like it, so what it did is it left this area and bonded to these little yellow things. And those are going to be called my troponin. And they're going to move, when they get bonded to this calcium, they're going to move my tropomyosin out of the way. So notice how now I could see these little pockets. Let me go back a couple. Can you see how here my tropomyosin was in the way? So my thick filament can't walk on this. Even though it wants to condense that muscle, it can't because these are in the way. When calcium comes, calcium then opens up these little the string that was in the way, which is called tropomyosin, and by moving tropomyosin out of the way, we've docked, we see this little area, and it's going to make it so this thick filament can walk on the thin filament, and you can see that what happened is this space condensed. And when that space condensed, that means our muscles squeeze together. Now, this may not look like a big deal, but if we did a bunch of these little microscopic squeezing throughout your whole arm, that's the difference of your arm going from the extended all the way to like touching your face. So clearly it makes a big difference because you have millions of them down your arm, and even though this little space is kind of microscopic, it's going to make you move. So now it's time. This is called contraction because you can see that the muscle contracted. But now it's time for relaxation, because if you try to stay in a ball or curl your muscles for as long as you can, you'll see that your muscles will fatigue and will actually get some lactic burns and rip. So we've got to do relaxation. And the first thing we're going to do to get our relaxation on is going to be having our acetylcholine esterase come in. And acetylcholine esterase is going to come in and eat up and destroy all of this acetylcholine. And when all that acetylcholine is destroyed, it's going to make this ligand gate. Remember, this ligand-gated sodium channel only opened because ACH was there. Now that ACH is gone, or acetylcholine is gone, all of this sodium is going to get pumped back out and leave. It doesn't want to leave because, remember, this area is so negative and these guys are super duper positive, so they technically want to stay, but we're going to force them out through some pumping action and pump them out and get them to go away. You might also remember that the reason this calcium left this sarcoplasmic reticulum is because the sodium came. And because the sodium came, they attached to these areas to sort of dock and sort of close the muscles up. So now what's going to happen is, now that the sodium has left, the calcium wants to return back to our sarcoplasmic reticulum because they were attached to the troponin. And what will happen is when they remove that tropomyosin, the stringy thing, is going to dock back to where it needs to go and get our muscle back to our original spot. So our muscles, these guys are going to close, which means that we now have this gap again. See how here we don't have this gap? And now all of a sudden we have this gap. And it's because our muscles went back to normal. The calciums went back to normal. And that's because the calcium is positive. This area is super duper negative. So they were happy to come back. And of course, the only reason the sodium left is because they were pumped or forced out. So let's say you're on a run or a jog or whatever, and you want to do this again and again and again. All you're going to do is go ahead and start this process with action potential. Action potential will come down and get this whole process to happen again and again and again. So anytime you do constant movement, like chew, go for a run, go for a walk, scratch your face, you're constantly going to do that because you have another action potential and another action potential and another action potential coming to sort of make this process happen and go through all our steps. Cool. What I'd love for you to do is write down all the steps that happen in each of these 4 phases, and you're going to be sending those as a homework assignment, those 4 steps, to Andy and Hector in a homework assignment, which you'll see a link for soon.